The EVVA 3KS is a high-security lock which was initially patented in Austria in 1988 by Kurt Prunbauer and was first manufactured in 1993. There are 12 unsprung sliders in this lock, 6 sliders on the left side and 6 sliders on the right side. Each set of 6 sliders interacts with one of 2 sidebars located either in the 3 or 9 o'clock positions in the core. These sidebars sit within 2 grooves in the housing of the lock. Each slider has 2 true gates and 1 false gate. The sidebar is composed of 2 parallel bars that interact with the 2 true gates in the slider. When all the sliders are in the correct position by either the insertion of a key or by successful picking, the sidebars can retract into the core, which allows it to rotate. Let's take a look at those sliders in more detail. There are 2 types of sliders, the single pin slider and the double pin slider. The double pin slider is slightly larger than the single pin slider. On a given side of the lock, the single and double pin sliders are arranged in an alternating fashion. A single pin slider will always be found directly opposite a double pin slider within a given position of the lock. This is how all the sliders are arranged in the 3KS. Let's take a look at the different sliders in detail. There are 4 different double pin sliders. Sliders 1 through 3 can be inverted to create a total of 7 slider positions. Slider 4 has its true gate equidistant from the center and no false gates. Therefore, if you invert the slider, it does not create a new position. If we line up these sliders by their true gate, we could see their relative positions in the lock. There are 5 different types of single pin sliders. Slider 1 through 4 can be inverted to create a total of 9 slider positions. Slider 5 has its true gates equidistant from the center, so if you invert the slider, it does not create a new position. It only changes the position of its false gate. If we line up these sliders by their true gates, we can see their relative positions in the lock. The 3KS stands for Drei-Kurven-System, or 3-curve system, which describes the key and its 3 curves. There are 2 curves that follow the same path which are shallow. They will interact with and serve as a guide for the double pin slider. One curve is deeper. It will interact with and serve as a guide for the single pin slider. Finally, there is a passive key control bar located on the bottom of the keyway, which interacts with the key and does not influence picking in any way. As we have previously learned, each slider has 2 true gates and 1 false gate. Because the sidebar has 2 parallel bars, it will either fit correctly with the 2 true gates or will interact with one of the false gates and one of the true gates. This is the basis for the jiggle test. If the sidebar is interacting with the 2 true gates, it will have some play and can be manually jiggled. If the sidebar is interacting with a false gate, it will be bound up and will not jiggle as much or at all. The jiggle test becomes much more accurate and predictable once all 6 sliders on one side of the lock are in a gate. So the first step in picking the 3KS is to set all the sliders in any gate. Once they are all set, you must then differentiate the true gate from the false gate with a jiggle test. The true gate will jiggle more, the false gate will jiggle less, or not at all if bound. Let's look at this in action. In this example, we have only 3 sliders in the last positions number 4, 5, and 6. For each of these sliders, the false gate will be on the bottom and the true gate will be on the top. For slider 6, these are the 2 possible positions where the gates are felt. For slider 5, these are the 2 possible positions where the gates are felt. And for slider 4, these are the 2 positions. So the first thing we need to do is put each slider into the gate. In this example, all 3 sliders will be put into the bottom false gate. So 6 is now in a gate. 5 now is in the gate. And 4 is in the gate. Once all the sliders are in a gate, slider 6 is binding, which means it's in a false gate. So we release some tension and put it in the other gate, and now it passes the jiggle test. We have to readjust 4 because it slipped. And now 5 is binding, which signifies that it's in a false gate. So tension is released and 5 is placed in the higher gate and it's jiggled, which means now it's in its true gate. The last slider to check would then be number 4. The lower gate is binding, it's not jiggling as much. We release some tension, lift it up, and now we're open. The sidebar has a protrusion on its front end which enters the core through a slot. This protrusion interacts with this groove in the key. The sidebar protrusion is important for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that you must choose a tension wrench that does not interfere with the protrusion of the sidebar. If the tension wrench is too large, the sidebar protrusion will be blocked from entering the keyway, the sidebar will not be able to fully retract into the core, and you will not be able to open the lock. In this example, there are no sliders in the lock, and just because the tensioner is too big, the core cannot freely rotate. In this second example, a properly fitting tensioner will not interfere with the sidebar protrusion, and the lock without sliders is free to rotate. Reason number 2 is that the sidebar protrusion will progressively enter the keyway as you engage the sidebar in more true gates. If you accidentally move a slider out of a true gate, the slider will push the sidebar out, and the protrusion will retract out of the keyway. This is another good way to check if the gate that you have selected is the correct one, and this technique will allow you to know whether or not you are on the right track. Okay, let's get to picking. Okay, so I'm using a bottom of the keyway tension wrench. It has been shortened as to not interfere with the sidebar protrusion. I'm going to be using clockwise tension. The pick I'm using is a homemade one specifically designed for the 3KS sliders. I've also picked this lock several times so I know where the approximate positions of the true gates are. I'm not going to be trying out multiple gates as this would take 3 to 4 times longer to pick and you guys would all get bored and stop watching. Okay, so I'm going to start with slider 1. I'm lifting it up into a gate and jiggling it, and that seems set. Number 2 is lifted and jiggling. Looking good. I'm going to go try for number 3, but it's just dropping, so that's not ready to get set. Rechecking number 2 and 3, that's still loose. 4 is being lifted. Try to get onto that nub and jiggle it, and that's in a gate. I'm going to try to nudge 5 from below. Pushing it up. Checking number 4. Now I'm checking number 5. That seems to be in a gate. 3 still loose. That's 1. Two is jiggling. 4 seems to be in a gate. 5 is in a gate. So I'm going to try to get 3, and that 3 seems like it's going to stay in its gate. So that's good. And it's jiggling. There we go. Going to readjust the magnifying glass on the outside. And we're going to go after the right side. So going to position 6 and lifting it up, and now it's jiggling. I think that's in a gate. Number 5. That seems to be in a gate. Number 4, lifting it up. I'm going to try to leverage underneath it. So I'm placing my pick underneath the bottom double slider, pushing it up, trying to get it into position so it jiggles just a little bit. Checking 5. That's 2. Gonna readjust my magnifying glass so I can get a better look in there. It's 2 and 1. Three, jiggling. 5 is bound, trying to pick that up, and now it's jiggling again. Just nudging 6, make sure that that's still jiggling. I'm going to 4, pushing that up. It's jiggling nicely up there. 3 is jiggling. 1, 2, and I'm going to move over my magnifying glass to the other side. I think we're all set on that side. So we're going to go back to the left. And now 3 feels like it's binding, so I'm going to try to push it up a little bit, get that jiggling again. That's good. 5 is jiggling. 4. Lift that up just a little bit, nudge it from underneath. That feels like it's set. And now back to 6, and we're open. Nice. All right, let's get this guy out of the vise. And we're going to fast forward through a lot of this stuff. I'm going to move all this stuff to the side. And in order to take the core out of the 3KS, what you do is you insert and then withdraw the key. By withdrawing the key, you're basically lining up all the sliders towards the center so that they don't catch in the grooves within the housing and the core slides out easily. So next I'm going to take out the key control bar and then the 2 sidebars. And then we're going to start pushing out all the sliders. So that's slider number 1, slider number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now for the right side. 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, and finally 6. Let's take a good look at this core. This is the top where the sliders go. That's the left sidebar groove, the bottom, and the right sidebar groove. And finally the keyway. This is the right sidebar. And the left sidebar. Gonna have to make all the sliders look pretty for you guys. And here they are in all their glory with their false gates. Next, we're going to take a good look at that core. And finally, the key. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this pick. If you did, I would love it if you would subscribe, and I'll see you at the next video.